Good morning. My name's Joanna Erskine. I'm the Head of Education at Bell Shakespeare, and it is an honour to be here. I echo everyone's sentiments so far. I'm so excited about what's going to be achieved in this room today, and it's also very exciting to be one of the partner organisations in the Creative Convergence project. I've been with Bell Shakespeare for 11 years, and thank you. Great. Is that better? Thank you. It's really wonderful to be asked to talk today about a part or a program that we run that's lesser known and I don't get to share as much about. Our national program reaches on average 80,000 students face-to-face every year. Our program about juvenile justice accounts for probably, we're lucky to get 100 every year. So it's small-scale, high-impact work. And I'd love to share some stories, some insights, challenges and successes today. Do we have the slides as well, or is this just, sorry, is that there as well? Thank you. Let me start by painting a picture. We commenced our juvenile justice program in 2010. We were granted funding by a passionate New South Wales minister who quit politics the day after signing the cheque. So we lost our champion, but we had the funding. So we went out to the centres who kind of didn't really care about what we were doing, didn't really get what we were talking about. We had all these amazing ideas, but because we had the funding, they, you could see the look in their eyes, but it was just a case of, all right, go ahead, give it a go. And despite all the meetings and the plans, it was all a big unknown. And we started off at a centre in New South Wales called Juvenile for girls, and preparation was interesting. We were going to do a performance for them. I had to give the centre staff a list of everything we were bringing in, which included 2 road cases full of props. So I had to send a list that said 1 fake dagger, 1 vial of poison, and so on. When we arrived at the centre, we spent over an hour doing inductions under a wall of contraband, hanging as a reminder that danger is ever present, don't let your guard down. So it's fair to say that by the time the actors got into the space, they weren't their usual bubbly selves. They usually mingle and chat with the audience, but this time they were just standing behind the banners waiting to perform. And in walked the girls in units segregated by coloured t-shirts. Some were as young as 12. A perimeter of guards with belts and radios. Near silence, very different to any other show that we would normally perform. So the show commenced and it was Romeo and Juliet. The girls were very quiet, just watching very respectfully, and we kind of wondered if anyone was interested at all. Then about halfway through, something incredible happened. Now we all, I'm assuming in this room, we take for granted that we all know the story of Romeo and Juliet, and we know how it ends. But it wasn't until halfway through that we realised these girls didn't. And so what happened halfway through was girls started calling out. They were yelling out to Romeo. They tried to tell him that Juliet was still alive. They tried to stop the narrative progressing. And by the end of it, the audience was in tears, the staff were in tears, we were in tears, the actors were in tears finishing Romeo and Juliet. And as soon as the show was over, the stage was just flooded and everyone just mingled and there was this excited conversation and those barriers were broken down. And one teacher I remember came up with a young woman. She said to me, "We've been learning about Shakespeare, haven't we? We don't let many men up on our wall of inspirational people, but we let Shakespeare up there." So since 2010, we've worked in male and female juvenile justice centres, 5 centres in New South Wales, Juniperina, Reby, Frank Baxter, Cobham and Acmina in Grafton, and now we're in Parkville and Malmesbury in Victoria with plans underway for more states. So why Shakespeare? It's important to acknowledge here what Shakespeare represents to many people. High art, upper class culture, another language, the subject of senior exams and teenage trauma. If an adult has a bad experience, they will tell a teenager that they will also have a bad experience. Parents and older siblings will readily say you won't like it. It's hard, it's boring, there's no point, you won't get it. I had a fridge repair man at my house last week, and when I told him it was my job to make Shakespeare fun and accessible for young Australians, he said, "That must be a hard job." And this is where expectations and outcomes get quashed before they're even given a chance. So here we walk into juvenile justice centres where these young people's levels of education are low to non-existent, let alone literacy levels and attitudes to learning and school. And to these same young people, we say, we're going to do Shakespeare with you. And this is something that adults with university education find difficult. We reckon you can do it. And that's the key, really, to start with setting the expectation for them. While the program differs every time, we usually start with a performance and then work with a group of about 15 young people over the course of up to 10 weeks on one particular play. It's a mix of self-selecting students and staff nominating who would be right for it. It also usually takes at least one session for the participants to tell the others that it's actually okay, and then you get more turning up. And then it becomes an annual thing that these young people want to do. One centre we've had a long association with is Frank Baxter on the Central Coast of New South Wales. Originating teaching artists were Hugh McKinnon and James Evans, and they taught the first few years together. And the first time we performed Macbeth there were 180 in the audience, which is kind of maximum attendees, and you could have heard a pin drop. There was no way those boys understood all the text, but they were vocal during the banter and they were just silent during the Shakespeare. The nature of this work is that young people are not able to be identified, and we are not given any information about them, and therefore there are no judgments, just as Shakespeare never judged his characters. And so the plays and the characters are the vehicle by which we're able to have incredible conversations about life choices and decisions and consequences, analysing and debating Macbeth's moral dilemmas without the boys realising they might be talking about themselves. Being drama, playing a role, allows them to explore these choices and decisions and questions, as we know, within a safe space, and offers them the opportunity to walk around in other shoes, empathise and imagine. But we can't say what the impact really is. And what we can speak to is the transformations that we do see in them. Seeing confidence grow, seeing their voices build in volume, standing taller, working together, learning lines they swore they would never be able to, conquering Shakespeare when most have very little educational schooling. And it's always most apparent in the faces of the staff and the guards who see these young people day in, day out, like the day a boy performed Is This a Dagger, almost by heart, and there was a guard standing watching with practically a jaw on the floor and said, "I've never heard that boy speak." The boy who asked to take a copy of the play back with him, and then we had to get special clearance for that to happen. I just wanted to show a short clip because there has been a documentary made about the program called Kings of Baxter, and this was the program taught by Hugh McKinnon and James Evans. The film has been made by Grumpy Sailor Pictures, directed by Jack Yabsley and produced by Claire Evans. And it's been doing the festival circuit and it has won some awards, and we're really proud of it, but you all know this, it's testament to the fact that program can go really well, and as soon as you bring in the cameras, everything goes wrong. It's probably the most pear-shaped it's ever gone, but it's an amazing story because you just see the power of teaching artists, right, and how they can just go with it and turn something out of nothing. Let me just do that. Thank you.
Hey, fellas.
Oh, wait.
Hey, Cubs. How you doing, man? Good. Hey, man. Yeah, good. So, you guys, you what? You want to tell a story? All right. Stand up. I'll help you out, okay? Any bits that you forget, I'll be there to help you out. Who do you want to be your Macbeth and Banquo?
Go on, cuz.
Come on, Ray.
Go on, bro.
Sometimes a kid will just throw you a bone, you know? And Carves was like, do you want us to tell a story? And I was like, yes.
Macbeth comes in and the weird sisters come out, you know, come out of the blue and just tell his fortune, and he's spinning out.
They say that he's going to be king, and he believes him.
Yeah, and Banquo was like a bit iffy on it.
He was a great warrior before that, you know, everyone respected him, and then, he had everything he wanted, so I don't know why they wanted to be king in that.
When the king announces the next person to be in line is his son, he shatters, and then he kills the king.
He doesn't really want to do it, Like his wife, Lady Macbeth, persuades him.
She only done it because she wanted to be queen.
She wants him to be powerful, but then when the going gets tough, she kills herself. Oh, well, we don't know that, but I reckon she killed herself.
If he never met the witches, like, she wouldn't have thought, yeah, I'm going to be queen, rah, rah, and kill this guy.
She tries to rule the country and tries to own it, and he turns bad, you know.
But we don't only work with Macbeth, we work with other plays, of course. We took a performance of Romeo and Juliet to Frank Baxter, and we really weren't sure how that was going to go down with the boys, particularly the actor playing Juliet looked like the age that Juliet is, and we weren't sure about putting her out there, but the performance went really well. The boys were very respectful. And then it came to question time, and the first question, this boy put his hand straight up, looked directly at the actor who played Juliet and said, "If my dad did that to me, I'd bash him." And a discussion followed about that moment and the family's relationship, and we had to eat our words on what we thought this audience would connect with. We connect other programs like our regional teacher mentorship. In fact, our work at Acmina in Grafton came from teachers that we mentored in that region that said, you need to come here, we have such an issue with kids going into the centre, and so now we do that, and the teacher that we mentored from the school teaches with us on his school holidays, so true legend. And Hugh, who you just saw in the documentary, he actually was in our production of Othello a couple of years ago at the Opera House. We were able to get 10 boys on day release to come to the Opera House and watch him do his thing on stage. And we told the cast beforehand that we had 10 boys from Frank Baxter coming to see it, just to kind of warn them. I will say those 10 were impeccably behaved compared to the rest of the school matinee audience, as you can imagine. There wasn't anything to worry about. There are obviously many challenges, and I'll whip through really quickly. I'm running out of time. Identification, obviously you can see there in the documentary, we can't show who these boys are. So content capture becomes very difficult, and obviously for funding and et cetera, that is a limitation. And it took a long time to get funding for this film because no one believed you could tell that story without seeing eyes and connecting. And that you would only tell the story of the teaching artists because they were the only ones that you saw. But it is, you really do connect with those boys, and the filmmakers have done an incredible job. Measurement challenges. Everyone wants to know what happened to these kids, and everyone wants to believe that once they've done the Shakespeare program, they've never committed another crime. Which is obviously not possible. We can't track them, and the reasons are diverse why, if and why they may reoffend. And we know that some of these kids come back, and we know that the reasons are complex. We know some of them reoffend so that they'll be fed 3 meals a day, and we see them again and again. The Department of Juvenile Justice wouldn't fund any programs after our first year because they changed to funding programs that can be proven to reduce recidivism. So that means what we've been able to do since then is really the only way to fund these programs is through philanthropic support. And that way you're getting multi-year, and there is the trust that you can make those decisions rather than being held to shifting parameters with government. Funding challenges, as I've talked about, you know, you couldn't imagine the life-changing letters that we got the boys to write, which doesn't mean anything to government, but we've been really supported by Bill and Patricia Ritchie Foundation, the Scully Fund and the Nielsen Fund. There are factors outside of your control, so many, and whether your program is in school hours or the rec program makes a big difference. Court dates constantly. Your lead actor gets released, which is wonderful for them, but you've got this constant turnover. In some centres, they advocate a strange thing where there are voluntary timeouts. So any young person in a workshop at any point can time out and leave. And so whenever they're placed or learning something or in a challenging situation, they can just time themselves out and you have no ability to change that. There's obviously also the other extreme volatility, especially recently this year. You would have seen in the news riots, violence at Baxter, in the news here in Victoria. And so we just keep those good relationships with the centres, and we're not afraid to go back in. And we recently had a screening of Kings of Baxter lined up just as it was in front page news that there were riots there. And we had to make the decision on whether we do that screening and go ahead, and we did, and it ended up being a really good decision. But there are successes. You must have a champion in the centre. On the ground, you literally have to have someone in the centre that gets what you do and makes sure those kids get from A to B and into the room to do it. The reason why Kings of Baxter that didn't go very well is because literally the 2 staff members who are our key people were on leave. So there wasn't actually anyone saying turn up to this every day. Longer programs twice a week for 10 weeks works much better than a 1 week every day intensive. You need that long form for trust. And ensuring where possible, obviously choosing the right participants, and something that we're working really hard to get better at, ensuring that our teaching artists match the diversity of the young people that they're teaching. Not setting outcomes. You never know whether you're actually going to get to a performance at the end, and that our funders understand that. But when we do, we're able to invite the friends and family. I'm getting there, I'm sorry. So where next? As I said, we're expanding into more states, but the reality is that we can't be everywhere, particularly long form, unless you've got people in those towns. So for the last 5 years, we've been developing a plan for expansion via VR technology, to design a program that can be used by staff in the centres themselves using the basis of this program. So, and also by at-risk youth in communities as a prevention program. So the form that we're looking at is a Macbeth neuro game to recreate this self-reflecting, critical and creative thinking skills being developed, having the ability to track decision-making and reflect, and most importantly, change decision-making and different outcomes. So participants play Macbeth, play his journey, then they get to replay, make different decisions and see what outcomes have, and everything's being mapped for the basis of discussion with a psychologist at the end. Do I have time for one little story? No, I don't. All right, I wanted to finish with a little story, but I will, all right, I'll just talk. So I just wanted to finish with a little story about when we did Hamlet, because we decided we were ready to do Hamlet at Frank Baxter. And it was an incredible experience because it's a dark play, and it's bleak. And we, I'm really top and tailing this, but what Hugh McKinnon, our teaching artist, came to was having that conversation with the boys about that question of to be or not to be, and that everyone in this room has made a decision to be, otherwise we wouldn't be here, and what was everyone's decision and reason. And so when they did their performance, after this boy got up and did the most natural to be or not to be I've ever seen in my life, because he didn't know it was the most, well-known speech ever written, he said to be or not to be and turned to each of the boys, and they all sat in a line, and there were staff and guards in that line too, and each person said to be for my mum, to be for my baby daughter, to be for a better life, to be, and everyone said their reason to be. So there's always that way of turning that around. And I think it's really, just ending on Ophelia's amazing quote about we know what we are, but we know not what we may be. So thank you.